Welcome along today. We're delighted to have you all here for our food and biodiversity nibble webinars we've been doing we're doing this week and next week as well. So this will be just a series of short webinars. So we'll start off today with our one on food miles, and then next week we'll have another one on different ways that we can use insects in our different food groups and stuff. So that'll be really exciting to hear about that. But thank you again for coming along today. As you might have noticed, we're recording this webinar, so don't worry now, the camera's just being spotlighted on myself, so it'll only be myself that's recorded if you want to keep your cameras on. Um, so I'm going to change my slide here. Great stuff. So whenever the presentation is on, if everyone could keep their microphones on mute, that would be brilliant, just while I'm presenting. And then at the end, we'll have time for a Q&A. So if you want to take yourself off mic then, and we can have a little chat. My colleague Claire is here, and she'll be in the chat box as well. If you want to pop in any questions in the meantime, you can shoot her a question, and then we can have a discussion at the end. So, like I was saying, this is our first webinar for a series of webinars, so we're delighted to have you. It's only a short little one, and this, of course, will be recorded and put up onto our Green Schools YouTube at the end. So today we will be exploring some of the links between our diets and the environment through a topic called food miles. So I don't know if anyone's ever heard of food miles before, but it's incredibly relevant to all the food that we eat every single day. So maybe a topic that we've never really thought of before, but very interesting nonetheless. Brilliant. Great. So food miles. So whenever we talk about farm to fork, we're talking about food miles. So this refers to the total distance our food will travel from where it's grown or where it's produced to wherever we'll buy it, and then eventually we'll eat it then. So this can include kind of the movement between farms and factories and warehouses, and basically it's all the different transportation routes that our food makes before it lands up in our homes. So, as we know, a lot of our foods are made up from many, many different ingredients, and these ingredients can be sourced from all over the world. So that's why we have such yummy meals, is because we can get such a wide variety of ingredients from all over the world. So we're very fortunate that we have access to such a wide range of different ingredients. So the further food travels, the more energy is used into transporting it. So this, which of course will increase the amount of carbon dioxide emissions being outputted. So this is why food miles is very often used as a way to understand the environmental impact of the way our food is produced. So a very normal everyday example of this is that in Ireland, we're really lucky here that in the summertime we can grow strawberries in our fields, or we can grow them at home. We can grow them everywhere. So our strawberries, whenever they're grown, if you were to buy a punnet of strawberries in the supermarket, it might only come, a few miles away, or maybe it came from the county over. So it doesn't have to travel very far. But in the winter time, some of you might have strawberries in your lunch boxes today. But as you know, we can't grow strawberries in the summertime here, or in the winter time in Ireland. So they would have had to come from one of our more sunny neighbours, possibly in Europe. Maybe they came from Portugal or France. So that adds to their food miles. So in Ireland, we can seasonally eat a lot of great fruit and vegetables, but if we want those fruit and vegetables all year round, we might have to get them from another country. So that's what we're talking about, food miles, how far they have to come to get here. So some of our foods might have traveled thousands of miles before they even reach our plates. And unfortunately, whenever they travel, they have to use a huge amount of energy. So they would have traveled on things like planes and ships and trucks, which are all, of course, run off fuel. So things like our petrol and our diesel. So the things that would fuel your cars at home, it's the same things are going into airplanes and trucks. So whenever they're moving, whenever they're running, they're releasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into our environment. So you'll probably recognize this if you're walking to school today. You probably could smell the carbon dioxide coming out of all the cars going past you. Sometimes you can see that black smoke coming out of cars. That's what happens whenever you burn petrol or diesel. That's our fossil fuels that we're talking about. So whenever we're trying to get our food from one part of the world to the other, they're releasing carbon dioxide that way. So greenhouse gases, whenever they're released, they're trapped in our atmosphere. And that's unfortunately what causes the climate change that we're talking about. So it's unfortunately not just even the transportation itself, but it's also things like producing the food. A lot of energy has to go into producing the food, into packaging the food, and into storing it. So all this different energy creates a huge amount of carbon emissions. So whenever we're thinking about food miles, it's really everything that's kind of building up into our carbon footprint. So maybe a lot of you haven't heard of what a carbon footprint is. So your carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases that we produce during the day. So this can be things like what we eat, how we travel to school, how we travel to work, what energy we use in our house. So even simple things like turning on the TV or making a cup of tea, these all add up to our carbon footprint because it's all the energy we use throughout the day. But now I'm not telling you that you can't have all these delicious foods from around the world. Now I'd be very upset if somebody told me that I can't have some food that we can't get in Ireland, like chocolate or something anymore. But it's more about finding a lovely balance between having exotic foods like our bananas, our coffees, and the different spices that we put into our dishes to make them more yummy. But it's about being just a little bit more thoughtful about where our food is coming from. And there's lots of different ways that we can really be more conscious about our food miles and finding a nice, like harmonious balance between the two. So here we have a little example of how food miles work kind of more within Ireland and how these food miles will build up over the course of your food's life before it gets to your plate. So all of our food, as we know, a lot of it comes from the farm. So if we were to have a lovely plate like I have there of sausages, rashers, and eggs, a lovely fry of a Sunday, we'd have that. That will start usually in the farm. So we'd start with the crops that are grown and the animals that are reared. So things like our hens would be producing the eggs, and our pigs would be producing the meat that would come into our breakfast. So once that food is ready to go, it'll be driven in a truck. So you have your carbon emissions there because it's going in the truck, and it'll be brought to a factory. From there, the food is used in recipes and it's put into packaging. A lot of the packaging that we use is actually made out of plastic. So plastic itself is actually a fossil fuel as well because it comes from oil. So again, lots more carbon emissions we're putting out there. And then it goes back into the truck. Sure, then and that has to go to the warehouse. And then from the warehouse, it can be, sent off to another country. It could be sent off in an airplane or onto a ship. Or else if it's going to stay in Ireland, they'll put it back into another truck. That truck then will come to the supermarket, and that's where you and your families would go to the shops to do your grocery shopping. And then from there, you'll probably pop it into the back of the car, and then you'll arrive at your home, and then you'll have your lovely breakfast. So I know you might think I'm a little bit mad for going through this big, big, long line of how my food got to my plate. And, it's not something I think about every day either, but it is important to be mindful of it because our food doesn't just magically appear in our cupboards every morning. As easy as it is to think that, it does come from somewhere. So it's important just to take the time to think how much my food came locally. How far did my food come? Sometimes you find your breakfast probably came from a very, very far away place. So here we have our local foods versus our global foods. So now that we've seen how food can typically move around Ireland, so it can move around pretty easily across the country because it doesn't have to go very far. It's all just within the one country. We can have a little look at how this can change across the world. So, like I was saying, so things that are grown locally, things like potatoes, you'll be getting those in Ireland really nearby. And if you're lucky and you know a farmer, they'll probably be coming with the dirt still on them, which is perfect. It means it didn't have to go very far. They probably came straight from the field and then it came to your dinner plate. That's great. Very few carbon emissions were put out there. And then usually foods that come locally, they're fresher and they're tastier and you're supporting local farmers. So it's a big win-win if you're shopping local. But if you're getting foods from across the world. So this could be things like bananas, it could be things like our chocolate, it could be things like coffee, anything like this. It kind of like being able to get food from across the world is brilliant. And we're able to support international farmers, which is really good. But it's important that we're finding that balance, like I was saying, because like that carbon emissions that are coming from across the world, it can be really extensive on our environment. So it's important that we're trying to find that balance. And there's lots, like I was saying, there's lots of different ways that we can cut down on all those different carbon emissions. So things like trying to find foods that are seasonally like we're buying things that through seasonality, or if we're trying to find things that we're trying to support our own local farmers instead. So here are the different ways that we can reduce our food miles and our carbon footprint. So every little action can make a big, big difference. So shopping local means the fewer transportation miles are being admitted, and then we can also support our local produce. So this keeps money in our own communities, and it can stop like long distance transportation, which is really important. Then eating in season helps us to enjoy foods whenever they're naturally available. So eating in season is really easy to do. And again, on our Green Schools website, we have lots of different resources about different ways that we can, eat food that are more seasonal and to know what foods are more seasonal. So we'll be sure to send them on to you after this. If you do have the space, I think growing foods yourselves in your own schools or in your gardens are a brilliant way to to like make food yourself and not rely on foods coming from far away places. This could be as simple as putting herbs on your windows, very small. You don't need a huge amount of space to do this. But we have our biodiversity crop cards, which are a great way to find out more about ways that you can grow food in your own school or maybe at home. They'll be put into the chat as well, and we'll send them to you afterwards. But again, this is just a really easy way to reduce your food miles, and also the reward of growing your own food is really, really brilliant. So we really recommend trying to, grow a few more veggies, especially whenever after winter we get into the warmer months. Then you can say no to plastic. So, like I was saying, our packaging unfortunately is made of from an oil, which is our fossil fuels as well. So if we can and we have the availability to do so, I really recommend that you could pick up your fruit and veg loose, or maybe you can bring your own bag to the supermarket to collect up your fruit and veg that way, and try to say no to all that plastic pollution that comes along with buying our fruit and veg in the supermarkets. And then perhaps the most important one really is to try and prevent food waste as much as we can. So this can be done really easily by planning your meals, trying to use up all those leftovers that come up after your dinner. Maybe you could have those in your lunch the following day. Storing foods properly is also really important. So if any have bananas at the end of your bag sitting there that you haven't looked at, that's not the way to store your fruit and veg properly, is that these things have to be out and they're being aired out properly. So ensuring that we're doing that. And food waste means that we're using by wasting food, you're wasting a lot of energy, you're wasting water, and you're wasting all that transportation that it took for that food to get to your home. So by not storing it properly and letting it go to waste and letting it mold away, there's a big waste of all the energy that had been put in before. So it's really important that we try to do our little bit to make a difference there. Now we're going to talk a little bit about our ugly foods, and ugly foods, very unfair term for all these lovely fruit and vegetables here that I have here. So in Ireland, food waste is a really, really serious issue. So it's estimated that about 800,000 tons of food is wasted every year in Ireland, which is incredible, huge amount of food. So most of the food that's being wasted there, it's been wasted before it even reaches our shelves in our supermarkets. So this is because they're not the perfect size and they're not the perfect color. So you'd find if you were to go through a field here in Ireland after the field has been harvested, maybe it was a potato harvest or carrots, if you were to walk through the field, you probably find that the farmer had to leave behind a load of vegetables behind them because they weren't perfect. They didn't look like the perfect potato. They weren't the right size. They might have had little, different funny characteristics about them, but they'd still taste the exact same as all the other potatoes in the field, but they just didn't fit the mold. They just weren't perfect to be sold in supermarkets, which seems a little bit unfair that they were left behind because they look a little bit more quirky or wonky. So, if we can buy or if we can grow our own foods, you'd probably find, well, if you were to grow your own foods at home, you'd probably find none of them are perfect. So that really just shows you that like we have this unfair expectation as to what our fruit and vegetables should look like. But if we try and, break the stigma around the perfect vegetables, we can make a massive step in the right direction to reducing food waste. So some of these fruit and vegetables here, we'll have a little look at some of them here. So we have our pepper here at the side here. So this is a pepper. This pepper is a little bit wonky looking, but I promise you it would taste the exact same as any other pepper that you would have in your dinner. Some of these carrots over here, they look a bit quirky as well, but again, they'll taste the exact same. It's just something happened the way that they were growing underneath the ground. They just didn't grow the perfect way they were supposed to. And the same goes for our apples. If anyone here has an apple tree at home, you probably know yourself that all the apples that are growing off it don't always look like the most perfect round red apple, that all of them have their own little quirks about them, but they all taste the exact same at the end of the day. And if any of you are ever shopping in your local supermarkets and you see that they have maybe a odd box or a wonky box of fruit and veg, we really highly recommend to go and support them where you can. Because like I was saying, they're all going to taste the exact same. It's just they don't fit the mold of all the other perfect fruit and veg in our supermarkets. So again, another reason to support locally there is because they'll probably have more ways that you could buy these more quirky looking fruit and veg. So, like I was saying before, it's important to, take the second to think, well, where did my food come from? And it's something that I don't even necessarily do all the time either. But this morning I said to myself, we'll have a little look and see how far my little snack went. So I had an orange, a little easy peeler orange this morning, and I checked it. And I didn't even realize when I was in the supermarket, but whenever I had a little look at it, it says it came from South Africa. So South Africa is pretty far from home here, and I live in Dublin, so pretty far from me in Dublin. And then I had a cup of tea. Now, whether you're a Lions fan or a Barry's fan, all tea in Ireland is realistically coming from the same three places. So the biggest producers of tea are in India and China and in Kenya. So when I looked up the back of this carton of tea, it said it came from Kenya, which again is very far from home. So as you can see here, we have my little map, and you can see that Ireland, let me see if I get my little pointer out. So we can see Ireland up here, and then a very long way away here, we have South Africa down here. And then over here, we have Kenya. So both these places are, very, very far away. And we can look up how far away these places are through a thing called a food miles calculator, which we're going to pop into the chat now in a second. So our food miles calculator showed me whenever I looked this up that from South Africa, so it estimated that roughly the oranges came from the capital city in South Africa, which is Pretoria. So from Pretoria to Dublin is 9,397 kilometers away. That is very, very far away, as you can imagine. And then for those oranges to come to Ireland on an airplane, it would have used 573 kilos of carbon, which is enormous. So that, if we were to equate that into an everyday usage of energy, it's enough electricity to run an Irish home for 2 months, which is a huge amount of electricity. So all the energy that you're using in your house over the course of 2 months, so things like showers, putting the lights on, all the electricity that you're using there, the equivalent of putting that on for 2 months is how much it cost me to have my orange this morning, which seems insane. And then the same goes for Kenya. So that's meant to be Nairobi. That the capital city of Kenya is Nairobi. So from Nairobi to Dublin is 7,257 kilometers away. So for the tea to go on an airplane would be about 443 kilos of carbon. Again, very large. That is enough to power a house in Ireland for a month and a half. So it's just a little bit less than the oranges. But that's a huge amount of energy that myself, have after using up just to have a cup of tea and an orange on my lunch break. So, it really puts it into perspective how far our food is coming every single day. So I'm going to invite you guys to, ask yourselves, where did your food come from this morning? So I'm going to see if any of you have anything in your lunchbox or anything in your bag. Maybe you have a packet of something in your school bag. If you have something and you read the back of it there, do any of you have any kind of food that came from a very far away place? And if so, I can show you how to use the food miles calculator. So if any of you want to have a little look there, and if anyone has something very interesting that came from a faraway place, if you want to put it in the chat, or you can come off your microphone and we can have a little look and see where it came from. Great. Okay, we've pumpkin seeds from China. That's madness, wherever they came from. Okay, brilliant. So we'll have a little look, and I'll share my screen and I'll show you how to use this website. Brilliant. So here's our food miles calculator. So the link to this has gone into the chat. So am I right in saying that that was pumpkin seeds from China? Is that clear? Yeah.
Yes, it
Okay.
was.
Brilliant. So we're gonna I'll put in China here. Let me see if I can find. Okay, brilliant. I'm gonna say it's pumpkin seeds. Cool, right. Let's see where they come from. Okay, so from Beijing to Dublin, we're saying that's about 8,282 kilometers away, which is very, very far, much further than my cup of tea was. And then down here, it will show you how it would have gotten here. So now it does give the option of an airplane or a car or a train. So we know ourselves it probably was coming on a train to get to Ireland. So it probably came on an airplane, and that's 506 kilos of carbon, which is fairly significant. It's a huge amount of carbon that came into them. But of course, now that's you can get your food from wherever you want, but it's just important to figure out how far the distance is for it to come to your house and for you to have whatever snack it is. But it's important if you can shop locally there as you know yourself, we just had Halloween there around the corner, and it's not too hard to roast those pumpkin seeds yourself if you wanted to, if you had any leftover seeds after all your pumpkin gardening. But yeah, well, whenever you can, I think it's really important to try and shop locally and, use whatever we have locally to us instead. But that's great. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to share? Any other foods?
We had a few more in the chat there, Ocean. So we had another class also had oranges that were from South Africa, and then we
Oh,
also had
wow.
blueberries from Peru,
Wow.
apples from Chile, and strawberries from the Netherlands. So I don't know, do you want to try a different continent there?
Okay, we'll do Peru. They were blueberries, were they?
Blueberries from Peru, yeah.
Wow.
I do like blueberries.
Yeah, me too. Genie back, yeah, you got very far there. That's 9,849 kilometers away. So even further than the pumpkin seeds from China. And then how much is that? That's 602 kilos of carbon that went in to get those over here, which is madness, isn't it? And that's again, that's seasonality, isn't it? We want blueberries all year round because they're delicious. They're one of my favorite fruits. And we don't even think about it. Where are they coming from? If they were coming from Europe, I suppose they would be a little bit less, but they have to grow in a sunnier climate. So we are looking to regions like South America to bring over a lot of these fruits. Same goes if you wanted pineapples. Pineapples never grow in Ireland, but of course they're coming from really, really tropical climates to try get them here. Okay, we do one more, Claire, and then
But there's
we're
actually an
simply.
interesting one here, Oisin,
Yeah.
which is a Nature Valley bar from the UK. So
Wow.
you didn't
Oh
mention
yeah,
something like that would have lots of ingredients, wouldn't it? So
absolutely.
do you think that would you have to think differently about something like that?
Absolutely, yeah, of course. Even things that has multiple ingredients in it. So with the Nature Valley Bar, you've had oats, I suppose there. So oats can kind of be grown everywhere. So you'd be really surprised. We can grow them here in Ireland, but who knows where they came from? Especially you're saying they came from the UK. And then the syrup as well that comes into it. Again, you can kind of get the syrup anywhere as well. But yeah, all those different components, even the sugar. Sugar, we don't grow sugar here in Ireland. Sugar cane comes from much hotter climates. So all those different elements, whenever they come together, they probably so you have to add up all those different places, and then the carbon footprint for those would be pretty high, unfortunately. Um, cool. Is there any other? Yeah, if you have any other questions about food miles, guys.
Yeah, I've put the link into the chat for the food map. So I know
Yeah,
we didn't have time to answer them all, but if people want to test it out themselves afterwards, they can. And if you have any
absolutely.
other questions about food miles or Ocean, you can ask.
Yeah. And even if it is a case where you have something at home so this website's brilliant because we'll show you a track from different countries, right? But if you have ones that are coming from within Ireland, if you were based in Dublin and you wanted to see how far Dublin to Cork was, if you were getting food from there, you can always pop that into Google Maps and it will show you there. And there's lots of brilliant carbon emissions converters that will show you different places. But like, lads, even if you all have a little look at the chat there are so many countries and continents coming up there. So we have pomegranate from Singapore, which is madness, delicious. But there's just such a huge spectrum of different countries that we're getting our food from here in Ireland. And that's just what's being supplied in our supermarkets. And we don't really think about it, do we? Where all these foods are coming from. So opportunities like this to have a little look and see how wide of a scope we're getting for all of our different foods across the world is really interesting.
I just added as well there, Roisin, because you mentioned the seasonal eating
Yeah.
calendar earlier. I didn't add it in there. But if you want to look, you can see there what fruits and vegetables are in season at what times of the year. So you probably
Hmm.
all know strawberries are in the summer, but you might know when broccoli is seasonably available. And you definitely, I think you notice the difference in taste when something has just been grown and it hasn't been sitting in a fridge for 5 months.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And exactly. And if things aren't ripe, they come, less ripe and they travel across here to Ireland. And by the time they come to our supermarkets, yeah, they look perfect. But they've been ripening maybe on a cargo ship or something like that, as opposed to growing off the plant itself. So if you can eat things that are coming locally, they taste so much nicer because they're fresh. They're really, really fresh. Super. And if anyone else has any other questions, please let us know. You can pop them in the chat. Otherwise, please, I really recommend whenever your lunchtime comes around, have a little look at the other things in your lunchbox to see where they're from because they'll really surprise you. I know the chat box here has really surprised me, the wide scope of places